Well, should we get this pantomime horse of a podcast underway then for week
Let's do it.
5? Right, well, let's get on with it. So, I've got a
Good
number of
afternoon.
things. Oh, evening. Yeah, sorry, morning. I tell you what I did think, Kieran. We're missing a trick here. At the end of every little thing, it says, it's like two mates talking at a bar, pull up a stool, we'll get the beers in. We never actually have beer on these sessions, and we absolutely should. I mean,
I've got squash in a Peroni glass.
I've got a massive cup of tea the size of my head, but we're not really at the cutting edge of drinking technology, are we? So I think your task for next week is to bring beer to this conversation, and
Very good.
but after the week we've had, we probably need a little bit of time off, don't we? So yeah, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Anyway, so I had 4 things I wanted to talk about this week. Some things around lessons learned from my customer conversations this week, and I'd be interested in some of your reflections on that. I've got a bunch of stuff on AI safety. That's come up in a few conversations for me. And I'd like to talk about our massive global expansion plans right at the end. So yeah, those are things I wanted to talk about. What's on your mind?
Great. No, I love that. Very look forward to talking about those things. I would love to talk about some of our new. Actually, there's a product, our product of the week. To hang on, listen
Hang on a
till
sec, play the
end.
jingle. You have to play the jingle in your head.
Yeah, we have to play the jingle ready for it. Well, you have to play it in your head, of course. So we'll talk about that a little bit and what actually is quite interesting in what we're doing in that space. Really looking forward to talking about the global expansion, and I am keen to talk about also the training we're just offered for a housing association. So I'll tell you a bit about that when we get to it.
Cool. All right. Well, please allow me to go first because there's some really interesting topics in here, I think. I, I know that you're a big follower of the social media relating to AI and all things going on, and you do much more of it than I do. But I've seen quite a lot this week about Copilot, Microsoft under pressure to recover some of their huge investment, and actually people really struggling to implement it in their organizations. And there was a really interesting LinkedIn article by a guy I really like called Bob Piggott on LinkedIn this week. And he talked about having a hands-on approach. And he talks about something called the fumble period, which is you've installed a product and then it's all great. I mean, it's technically fine, but people fumble it. And I wrote to him saying, well, as an ex-rugby player, I can definitely actually some of the current England. Never mind. Moving swiftly on. As a rugby player, I could definitely relate to that whole fumble period piece. But it made me think about a couple of things which I think are important. One is the kind of almost the level of training that people get in the first instance. And I think lots of organizations kind of misjudge that. And linked to that are the hackathons that you've been doing for housing association, universities, colleges, others, and how that really, I think, makes a massive difference in how you can achieve more in half a day with a team than you could in, a month of videos and PowerPoint slides and people talking techie. So yeah, I didn't know whether you could contribute on that, but let's start with the hands-on approach and how that makes a difference from your perspective.
Yeah, and I've read a lot about this over the time. I read something about we look back at when computers first became a big thing. I guess sort of late 80s, really, wasn't it, when they really hit the workplace? And it took quite a long time before productivity really changed as a result of that. And I think that's an interesting analogy, isn't it? Because we're exactly in that place of people. It's interesting. People, Copilot, it kind of arrives. I think it's an easy get out for a senior team to say, yeah, you've got Copilot, so we're doing AI. Probably. I suspect the senior team don't actually know really much about it and don't use it much. I mean, it's quite common in our customers even where actually the C-suite don't really use
So
the products.
yeah, we come across that a lot. I've certainly come across that a lot with my customers.
Yeah, and I think it's really hard because if you don't know anything about it yourself, and you think, I mean, just Word. I remember walking through the DFE in 2000. early 2000s, 2003, 2004. I remember we talked about this and watching people trying to open Excel using Word, watching people putting numbers in a bulleted list, in a numbered list, not
Yeah,
using the automation, watching content tables being manually created, all those things that you just, when do you find out that actually Microsoft Word can do all those things and many, many more things?
mm,
And unless someone shows you or you're curious enough to kind of challenge yourself, you're not going to stumble into it.
yeah,
And I think that's the thing. You've got Copilot now. People have had a bit of a basic go. They've been pretty unimpressed because they've probably started pretty poorly.
yeah.
And yet, who's doing anything about it? So I think it is a huge challenge. I mean, even our products, as we know, we put them in, and normally what happens in our sort of traditional sales cycle, if you want to call it that, is, there is one or a handful of people that are like, we want it, we see the benefit, we want to bring it in. They are big users, but getting other colleagues to start using it doesn't just happen.
Mm.
With the exception of our very large housing client, where they're still in, they
That's
haven't
right.
launched officially, and they got 313
I
users,
know,
and
that's right.
they still haven't told anyone officially, apart from the 10 pilot team.
Yeah, we've got another customer a bit like that, where the CEO said, and no one's really using it. And I'm like, hang on a minute, I'm looking at the stats here, and over half of your team are actually using it in the last month, and he just
Exactly.
didn't know.
The CEOs don't know; they don't use it. That's the thing. So I think, I mean, the training has to be, and I've seen Microsoft have a load of online stuff. Google have some really good stuff. LinkedIn
They
training
all
there.
do.
They've all got
Mm.
these free courses. One of the big problems, I think, is firstly, who's motivated to actually take the time out to go and do that? Not many people. So you kind of need to encourage and incentivize that. But secondly, most of those training courses are very generic.
Mm.
And one of the things I have learned in
Mm.
my career is that people are really bad at read across, at that kind of, oh, I see, they're doing that in education. So, oh, I get it. I could do that in my housing world. And I show people quite a lot in the I show housing people the education Ofsted tools we've got. Housing have a very similar problem. They get inspected, they've got regulatory standards, they've got to demonstrate that they meet. And it seems that the penny doesn't drop when you show them this and say, and you've got the same problem. And I know we don't have Ofsted.
That's right. That's right.
So I think that there was a whole bunch of kind of expectation that somehow people are going to just find their way, and they probably, well, eventually they might, but it's going to take years. And I think the home working problem for a lot of organizations, I think about the amount of technical skills I learned just by seeing someone do something on the screen next to me and go, hang on a minute, what witchcraft did you just do there on that? And, the amount, probably 90% of what I know technically on software applications is learned from that.
He's learned from witchcraft.
Learned from seeing someone doing witchcraft
Robbing and duplicating.
on
R&D's always been your way, Kieran. Always been your way. Very good.
yeah. And our
Um,
training, we should talk about our training on this. This is the point that I wanted to talk about was we were approached following I was on stage in Glasgow, as our audience will remember. And
if he's awake.
one of the CEOs, yeah, one of the CEOs in the audience contacted me afterwards and said, I'm keen to get some sort of awareness training, really, foundational AI training for her team. And would we do it? And then I sent it back. What I normally say to most people, response is, I don't really do training apart from if you're buying KnowledgeFlow, because we want to obviously show you how to use that. But let's have a call, because if we can help, we're always happy to help. And then we
Hmm.
had a call and made a call. We made a decision kind of in the call, we would do this because I think it's, from a sales perspective, I think it'll be great for us to be in a place where we can go in and hopefully have some good conversations with people that are on the journey. And secondly, just because it's so necessary. And we come at it from not the so many people I see on stage either giving bad advice, use Notebook LM with your students. Well, you have to be 18 plus, so don't. Or very theoretical and kind of high level AI stuff. And I love what we bring is that mix of practical. We understand business challenges from our background in consulting, and that's what we've kind of instilled in our team, I think. And that practical knowledge of what actually works and doesn't when you're trying to
Hmm.
make AI do things that are useful. So really, I hope that the training thing we're going to offer is a 2-hour session, pretty low price. and will be genuinely useful and it's going to be focused on some of the time with hands-on keyboards, that thing you have to do in your customer inquiries, in your reporting, in your whatever you do. Let's have a quick look at how it can actually help you in your role.
Is it an exceedingly compelling price, like that consultant said last week about,
I think it probably is.
stuff?
Well, this we've quoted 200 quid for this one. I probably shouldn't put it on the
You
podcast.
shouldn't say that.
Well, you can edit it out. We quoted, insert fee here on screen, just this much money. But I mean, this is the first one we're testing with them, and it will be a bit more than that. But I don't see it being more than £400 or £500 for a bigger organisation, frankly. Anyway, because it's for us, it's really a sales exercise, if we're honest. But it was high value to the client, so it's kind of win-win, really. It fits into our world of doing something useful and hopefully benefiting us at some point afterwards.
Yeah, and I think it is that thing about just getting people to actually play with it. One of the reflections that I had was I still come across people who are worried about breaking it, and it's like, you can't break it, just do it. You know, what's the worst that could happen? You can get things wrong. And I was chatting to someone earlier in the week about, is it Sir Ken Blanchard who did the TED Talks on education? Oh, crikey, you'll have to look his name.
I can't remember his name.
Anyway, he was the very famous educator who basically said, you know, we beat creativity out of our kids in school, and and actually it's similar. And I drew the analogy. It's a bit like that with AI. With adult, we're going to give you this highly expensive and very powerful AI tool, and people are reluctant to use it because they're worried about getting things wrong, or they're too busy, or whatever else. But there is something about, I've seen people go, I'm worried about getting it wrong or breaking it, and you just can't, you know. And actually there is also, I think we might have talked about this last week, there's a benefit to capturing things where AI does get things wrong, and you go back and say, no, that's incorrect, or I don't like it like that, or I don't want it in blue, I want it in green, or whatever it is. You know, there's something about training your AI. And actually part of the problem for lots of people is that they're starting again every single time they use the AI. It's forgotten your preferences, it's forgotten the tone of voice, it's forgotten how you want to approach things. So having something where you can effectively train your AI to be like you want it to be, so that it knows it straight out of every time you switch it on, rather than having to go through the same process every time, is quite important.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's sort of where we need to go with KnowledgeFlow, it's pretty good in that space. It could be much better. And I think the learning from its own interactions, and what's on my mind here is, if you're in a college dealing with a tenant inquiry, at the moment, we can have KnowledgeFlow agentic respond directly to an inbox inquiry, draft an answer locked, grounded in your policy, so it will be correct and it will be compliant and it will be written in the right tone. When tenant B comes in, or student B comes in and asks a question you haven't previously answered and it can't answer it, I think we've got to quickly build that in, so that once someone's manually added a new bit, it knows about that, it knows about exceptions, it knows about in housing there's a lot of thing about reasonable adjustments. So that's, you know, with typically for neurodivergent or accessibility needs, going outside of the policy, and that is reasonable adjustments, i.e. a human decision on what is reasonable. So I think being able to quickly have KnowledgeFlow learn from what is acceptable and start to offer those. I remember one of the CEOs of a housing association said, our policies are very clear, light bulbs are your problem, not ours. But we always, you know, if Mrs. Miggins, who can barely walk, has one, we normally nip round and do it for her. It's considered a reasonable adjustment, and I think that's the place
that
where
common sense applies thing.
And getting that into the learning of your own enterprise AI system, I think, is really interesting and becomes way more useful to you. And of course, our strategic aim is to have customers that love working with KnowledgeFlow and stick with us for the next 10 years at least. So
cool.
IT managers you wanted to talk about.
I did. I wanted to go on to IT managers because it's kind of linked to that in some ways. And that whole piece about how you use AI, but how you set yourself up for success with AI. And I've been reflecting this week that there are a bunch of IT managers that don't really understand the scale of the
No,
disruption.
surely not, Neil.
It's true, it is. Yeah, they just don't get the scale of disruption that's coming. And it was born out of a conversation with an IT manager, very excited, lovely chap, and they were saying, "Oh yes, and my data lake will be up and running in the second half of this week, and it's like second half of this year, and it's on my PDP." And it was along the lines of, "What are you doing that for? Why don't you just make your information AI readable, and then you can just use it now? You don't have to wait till your data lake's up and running." And he was like, "What? But it's on my PDP." And it was just like, hang on a second, it's the wrong set of behaviors
Yeah,
driving this. And then that whole I had another conversation about a group that wanted to put in 200 plus documents into KnowledgeFlow, and they were talking about structure. And I was like, don't bother formatting it. The AI can format it better than you can. It
yeah.
needs to be in a markdown file that all it cares about is the text. It will structure it much better, and it will format it much better than you can, and in a much shorter space of time. So don't stop messing around with things that you think are important, and get on with the stuff that actually is. So
Yeah.
yeah, really, really interesting set of conversations this week around that kind of thing.
And I mean, as we know, these are the conversations we have all the time. I think getting how big the impact of AI is going to be, and I don't want to be a futurologist, and I don't pretend to be in any way, but it is very clear. You don't need to have really any foresight to know that this is going to fundamentally change all of software, and indeed way more than that.
Yeah.
I think that your point about getting AI ready data, I mean, policies should be ideally now just a text file. No, we don't. Headings is helpful. We don't need formatting. You don't want all that white space and boxes and images and all that
No.
stuff that humans like. AI needs it clean, straightforward, concise, and then it can do all of the producing it in as many different ways as you want, as you know, yeah, in whatever language you want, and as a poem, if you like. So I think people need to get their head around that because it is. Yeah, I mean, I've with one of the hackathons we did, there was a conversation about, well, can the AI output all our policies with the right header and footer, so that, and calling it the college name and everything in the same colours and the time frames and not time frames, the heading sections and all of that. And I said, well, you could do some of that, but you don't need it to do any of that. And we managed to, in 5 minutes, they all agreed. The senior team were like, yeah, actually, you're completely right. The formatting is irrelevant. They
Yeah.
were going to spend ages and try and crowbar AI to do things that it
Yeah.
just does not need doing. So that was interesting. And I think on your point about the data lakes, I mean, not my words, but I read a lot around how, and I can see exactly how it works, how AI, knowledge flow, other platforms can look directly at as many different data sources as you want. I've heard this described as a data verse as opposed to a data lake
Mm,
or a data warehouse.
it's true.
Um, and you can pick data from those and then have the synthesis layer, to use Nate's term, that can run across your organization with the data wherever it is. So you don't need to do all of the kind of warehouse stuff. I think it's helpful if you do the warehouse thing because you'll have identified common identifiers and cleaned up your data on the way in. So, but it's a hell of a cost and a interim step that isn't necessarily needed. And what about the 80% of data which is not structured data and isn't going to
Yeah.
ever go into your warehouse? Because
Yeah.
that's 80% of your organizational data. It's the stuff Gen AI can get into and look at and find patterns and answers. And
Yeah,
that is
that's a
about,
really
again,
good point.
making it readable. It's not
Yeah.
about putting it all in one place. It's
Yeah.
about making it readable.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a really a really interesting point. And I still think about the amount of data that people have got all over the place on their laptops or in folders they shouldn't have. And come back to your formatting point. I was a little wry smile to myself. There's another organization that we work with who have insisted on trying to get output put into a table in a very specific format when it
Yeah,
just
yes.
doesn't need to do. How much time has been wasted on that is just incredible. When frankly, you could just have the AI produce the output, write it in a sentence, and away you go. You're done. Just absolutely nuts. So
Exactly. And
yeah, lots of learning to do.
probably more useful for the end customer as well.
Yeah.
Have a pros, but yeah, interesting. Exactly that.
That's a nice little segue into customers because those are my next 2 points out of my 4 lessons learned this week. And there were 2 customers that I've talked to, which I wanted to share with you because they're completely opposite ends of the spectrum. So one is a public sector organization where I've been talking to them for 4 months now about using AI to solve some pretty important problems for them. But some of them are really just admin burden, drudgery type things where AI could just massively improve the quality of the lives of the people who are doing this stuff. And they said, oh well, we've just had Copilot enforced on us, and I was like, yeah, and they were like, well, we think we might want to look at using creating an AI extension sometime in the next 12 months. And I was like, 12 months? Crikey.
It would have
Yeah,
all moved
how
on by then anyway. Never
it,
mind what the
un,
ridiculous.
unbelievable. Yeah, just like that whole kind of how is that going to help you people between now and 12 months time?
Yeah.
So that was nuts. And then compare that to the another customer that we've been talking to for not very long, but we thought they'd gone cold and quiet, and then they just rocked up and went, "Oh, we think it's brilliant. Can we have it tomorrow, please? Actually, no. Can we have it by the 1st of April?"
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah. Just unbelievable kind of dichotomy of opinions, and I guess that's just normal in sales land, isn't it? Of any kind of discrete, any sales organization, you're going to get different customers like that. But yeah, it just struck me as very different.
It's no a huge challenge, but I mean, 'cause I get very, as you know, get very frustrated that the lack of urgency that people see in this space. And of course, we have to understand and work at the pace of a client, but equally, it's just like, can you not see that what this could do for your organization and what
Yeah,
it must do for your people and your customers that you serve?
yeah,
And the faster you can get on that journey, the better you're going to be. And just waiting always strikes me as bizarre. But yes, the sales cycle is a real challenge for us, I know, and it seems to get harder, as you touched on, I think, a few podcasts ago.
yeah.
And we see,
Seven or eight touch points usually to get
yeah,
to a point. There was
more,
something different about this one though that I wanted to share with you, which was that the kind of person who put the kind of nail in the coffin was the data protection officer, the DPO. And their comment was, I'm responsible. If anything goes wrong, I could go to jail or personally be fined. And I was like, hang on a minute. We're not talking about specialized, personalized, personal identifiable data. We're not talking, we're talking about some admin reports and handling email input.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's just so really interesting that their kind of view was it's all bad. Don't touch it with a barge pole because I could go to prison.
yeah, interesting.
Um,
And it's the
so
ignorance, isn't it, of that? And do you remember? I mean, this still goes on, I'm pretty sure, but I remember when we were consulting with the Department for Education. And the amount of times I would hear people saying, "Oh, I can't do that because of data protection."
yeah,
And total nonsense in
yeah,
90% of cases, because firstly, there was no identifiable data in what they were talking about mainly. Secondly, you are allowed to use the data for the purposes that which it was given. And so there was, and then you've got legitimate interest on top of all of that that enables you to do things that, but just the laziness, the ignorance that is frankly hindering really what could be great progress. And I see it all the time with people assumptions about AI and therefore the concern they have. Good that people are under trying to. I don't know if they are trying to understand. Actually, it's good to be cautious enough to check.
no, I
But
think
you know,
there's a legitimate safety concern, and we talked about this in terms of education, but also in other areas. There's something about AI which is really challenging. I've written a few pieces about parents talk to your kids about AI. Yeah, they shouldn't be using it for relationships. You need to be really careful about what you put in, not just from a data perspective, but also, people are using it for harmful purposes. And I know that, for example, if you put into Chat GPT, I want to create a bomb, it'll say you can't do that. I'm not telling you how to do it,
yeah,
or something like that.
yeah,
But those are very generic guardrails, and actually they're almost too late. You need to be further up the pipe. You need to be further along the chain to be able to spot, to be able to categorize, to contextualize. If you're if you're writing something about I don't know, HMS Victory, which I know is a very important topic for you, and being a grotty yachty and all that you are these days. If you're talking about cannon and you're talking about gunpowder, that's a very different thing. So having something that can understand the context of the query, but if there is a legitimate concern, being able to flag that and all of those things are technically doable. We know because we've done them as an experiment. But actually, it raises a whole set of policy issues. And this is why most people ignore policies. I think they're not important. They're bloody fundamental in how things run. If somebody puts in a query about self-harm or something and they put it in at midnight, what do you do? Who's responsible for that? Should you be doing something now? How do you flag it? Do you just switch it off so you don't have it in the evenings? Is that realistic? Or is somebody picking it up the next morning too late? There's a whole set of policy issues about AI, which come back to my point about the IT managers. It's not just the IT managers; it's the senior leadership. As CEO, you're fundamentally responsible at the very end of the chain. What happens if these things occur? So people thinking about the AI policies, we still get quite a few people downloading our free AI policies off the website
Yeah.
because and the fact that they still don't have one is gobsmacking to me. But lots of organizations absolutely don't. So having a starting point. So I get the safety angle. I get that safety is important. I get that we are doing things that can absolutely help and support. But it comes back to the overall arching, how does AI fit into your organization and how does it work?
Yeah. No, indeed. And safety is, as you know, we talked about last week, I think, on the podcast about our new safety filtering. So it flags automatically when it spots things that are untoward. And the latest addition to that is also redaction now that we have across everything. So if you put in names, emails, addresses, they're automatically redacted before they go into the Cosmos database for saving as an audit trail. So that's really, really good because that just keeps things fully compliant, even though it's secure anyway. It
Yeah,
just makes sure that you're not retaining unnecessary personal information. You've still
yeah,
got a record of the conversation and you can go back and unpick it, but it doesn't store it like that. So that's a really good move, I think, for safety at all levels. Because I mean, one of the things interestingly people are asking me about is freedom of information requests.
yeah.
And if one of our customers receives a freedom of information request for a subject access request or something like that,
Right.
then can they send back from what the AI's audit log is? So, which is really interesting. So redaction really helps in that
Yeah.
space as well because you're just not storing it with the name. So it's
We've not
helpful.
seen we've not seen it very much yet, but I can imagine there will be for our customers, certainly, especially in the areas that we work, like housing and social care, that those customers are bound to get lots of subject access requests
Yeah,
and requests for deletion of data and things like that. And being able to prove that you can do that quickly and compliantly and prove that to the person in question is just so important. And again, I worry that lots of organisations don't think about that kind of thing.
yeah,
Or indeed they go the other way and say, I've thought about it. I don't like any of it. Shut it all down. We're not doing nothing. And
yeah,
again, that's
yeah.
that's the wrong
Put the
answer.
no
I
in
would suggest
innovation. And
you
it's
put in the
interesting,
no in
isn't it? Because
innovation.
I worry about a whole bunch of the kind of AI tools I run into, and people often say, "Oh, yeah, but I've seen this other thing," which are kind of made by a bloke in his garage, really, ultimately. And you can all do that with a
Where's his
gentle.
garage?
So, where is
Is
it?
it in North Korea?
How is it? Well, well, but then just not thinking through some of these other challenges that exist and aren't obvious to you unless you've been in business doing the kind of boring end of this stuff for years, which is where our CTO, the wonderful Big Don, where his life has been in this space. So those things are just kind of natural. Of course we've got to have an audit trail. Of course you've got to have safeguarding. Of course you've got to have triggering, filtering, and
Yeah,
monitoring and explainability and all the rest of it, which is just great because I think, on the face of it, our tool is amazing and there are other tools that are good, but actually ours is also incredibly compliant and yeah, the boring end of it I think is the stuff that makes it
It keeps
usable
people
by public
safe.
services.
Yeah, it keeps people safe. That's the most important thing.
Yeah. And talk about
Cool.
keeping people safe, our product of the week
Oh
I'd like
yeah.
to talk about. Sing your jingle. Sing your jingle now,
We have
audience.
we have to get it. We have to get a jingle sorted
Well, I
out.
think we should get our audience to share with us what they are putting, what's going on in their head. I imagine
Is what you'd say.
heavy metal, perhaps. Is it the
Some thrash
I've got a
metal.
dentist song which I've told you about before, I think, which is the Ace of Spades, Motorhead, and I don't enjoy the dentist, so I've got noise cancelling headphones, and before I let them do anything, if I'm about to have an anaesthetic injection, I'm like, wait, I put these in full blast, and I hit on the Ace of Spades, and it's brilliant because it kind of makes you cross and like, come on then. And it definitely works for me. So, well, the dentist
Have
has
you
to
ever
kind of
punched a
nudge me.
dentist? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
Yeah. Well, the dentist kind of has to nudge me if he wants me to do anything because I just can't hear a word that's going on. It's so
He's
loud.
bitten his finger.
Anyway, so if you're now imagining the Ace of Spades in our
I am.
jingle, then
I am.
fair enough. Um, it's actually last week's conversation we talked about, which is conversation sharing. So KnowledgeFlow's ability now for you to be having a conversation with it, doing the usual AI thing. You like looked at the data, reformatted it like this, added that, tested this thing, checked that. At that point, you can, or at any point, share with any other colleague inside your Azure tenancy. And they will see exactly what you're seeing, and anything they add, you will see. It's literally a shared work together thing. And we talked about it briefly last time, and it has some utility as just a general kind of work tool. You're both working on the same case,
Yeah.
whatever. Where I think it's really interesting though is in approval, where you've now, if you wanted to say to your manager, here's a tricky thing, I've dealt with it, here's the whole story, if you want to read how I've dealt with it from the original right through to the answer I'm planning to send the tenant or whatever, you can do that. And then I quite like the idea if there's an approval way you could write approved or ticket or
Interesting.
something, you've now got an audit
Yeah.
trail and you've got that kind of governance built in ability. So I think that's really interesting. I mean, you can of course just send the final, here's what I'm going to send them, but that's just all slightly frictionful, isn't it? This would be an instant share the whole thing. You can read whatever you like, just read the end. If you're happy with the response, you don't need to go back up the train. But if it's
Interesting.
tricky, you can go back and see the whole thought process.
Yeah. And what was going through my head was a couple of things really. One is, does that add more burden? But actually, you could just get the thing to summarize, and if there were 200 steps in
Indeed.
the process, why don't you summarize the two? What are the three key points I need to know? Is this compliant with our policies? Yes or no? Off you go. So I can see that being really interesting way of um, trying to get some governance into the process because we haven't really heard much on the wires recently about governance in that kind of way.
No, indeed.
But it's got to come back at some point in time. Not least for some of the reasons we've talked about regarding safety
Indeed.
and other things. So yeah, no, that is a really interesting feature. I will have a play.
Yeah, and it also because it brings explainability back into it, which is, as we know,
Yeah,
the one of the big challenges of AI and the black box problem. But just that ability is why I'm looking at this response as a manager and I'm being asked to approve it. I
yeah.
don't quite
Why?
get it. I can either
Yeah.
ask or reread or both. So I
Y-
think it's potentially very interesting.
haven't heard the words explainability and citation for quite some time. It's interesting that's dropped out of the lexicon. I don't know whether it's that just because we're moving in different
I think though it's
circles,
still
if
very
there's
real for people when they don't trust AI, and I hear that a lot from
uh-huh.
early users. Let's put it that way. Folk, it still comes up quite a lot, and I normally explain them because knowledge flow you can switch on semantic
Yeah,
reasoning, and that just explains to you at the beginning what the AI is going to do as a result of your query prompt, whatever, which is really helpful because it just you can see if it's interesting. You can read in there if you type a typo, it will quite often cite and say, I can see this word, I think they mean this word. So
yeah.
you can properly check what's going to happen. And then with the citations at the end, you kind of close the loop in my mind on explainability. There's still a little bit of black box in the middle, but it's
Yeah.
saying to you, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to look in all these policies to answer this. I'm going to blah, 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 blah. Here's the answer. and here's the policies I used to create the answer and the extracts from them that
Yeah.
I was looking in. So it's a kind of, I mean, it's closer than a human. I think this is interesting when people challenge me on all that black box, and I always sort of want to say, when you had that great idea in the shower this morning, how did you have it? And you don't know, do you? And you don't care. No one ever challenges a human and says, "Well, hang on a minute. What were all the books you read that might have led you to this thing? And then what connections did you actually make in your brain to have that idea?"
Yeah.
And that's what an LLM is ultimately doing. So
Yeah. I again had the conversation with someone this week about, oh yeah, it doesn't get things 100% correct. It's like, when was the last time you got things 100% correct? What's your percentage, would you say? So yeah, really, really
indeed.
interesting. Anyway, that's
Good.
enough of that old nonsense. Shall we, because time is pressing on,
Yes,
shall we talk about global expansion?
definitely. Definitely we should. And we need to make sure we've got the website news article up to talk about this fine global expansion. We are going into drum roll, Canada. So our great friends Qatalyst Research Group, who we've been talking to for, gosh, probably a year or so, I would
It's a
guess.
long
But
time.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
been a long time. We've been going backwards and forwards, sharing ideas, talking about AI as it's developed. And Ted Weiker there, who leads that organization, is fantastic. He's very, very knowledgeable in the AI space, which is great. And so we kind of geek out, I guess is the phrase, quite a lot together. And I met him when he was over in London, which was fantastic too. Um, anyway, I'm very excited to say, are keen. We've now announced our partnership where we will provide knowledge flow. We've got some work to do to adjust and indeed build some new tools within it. Their work is often with economic development, and I've got to try and say it now, municipalities. I got it
Very good.
in Canada, a lot of kind of work-based economic sort of research. I'm sure I'm not doing them justice at all, but they've got a great team of people that have really good grip on AI and also understand those client challenges, which is our perfect play. As you know, that's exactly what we want to do, is to make AI that works to do the things that are unique and niche and ultimately beneficial in public services. So yeah, I'm really excited to see where that goes. They have 350 sort of customers that they're going to
Wow.
work with. So, and they've got a team of people that are ready to go. I think it's brilliant as a consulting add-on, because knowledge flow, I mean, to bring that alongside consulting, because you've now got something that is tangible, not just AI can help you, which is a lot of the consulting at the moment. And
Yeah.
some of that's useful, some of it less so. But AI can help you. Here's the platform that can help you, and here I've built something to show you how that will do the thing.
Mm.
So I think you've got, and as we know, adoption of AI tools in your organization, just talking about it, is a massive challenge. So to have a team of people that can put the boots on the ground, who
Yeah.
know and love the client and understand deeply those sector challenges, that can work alongside knowledge flow. I'm really excited about it, and I hope that it will
Yeah,
mean
me
that.
too.
Yeah, and I hope that, I mean, obviously sales it's great at a very, very sort of, I don't know, thin, shallow level, but at a deeper level, being able to get into some of those most challenging areas and accelerate what they do to be able to hopefully drive more jobs and do a better job by citizens of Canada. So yeah, really exciting.
Yeah, and hopefully we can bring some of that back here too. So there's bound to be some lessons learned. That's the great thing about the consulting model, isn't it? You take information and insights from one place and bring it to another and make a difference now. And I'm sure we can do that. But I have to go now because I have another appointment. It's in a pub. I can't deny it. But I
Very
have to
good.
go very soon, so I'm going to leave you to it.
Good.
And
Thank you.
I'd like to say to our audience, if you're still awake, then good night, and I'll see you next
Sleep
week.
well.
Bye.
See you. Yeah, see you next week. Cheers.
See you,
Nice one,
fella.
Neil.
Take care.
Take care. Bye bye.